Hello everybody. I wanted to do a couple of quick videos here for this class because I realize my other videos rely pretty heavily on the graphing calculator. So I want to do some supplemental videos here designed strictly for Microsoft Excel. So what I have here is I have created a data set of 20 numbers. And I want to look at some basics that we can do in Microsoft Excel. So the first thing I want to be able to find is the minimum and the maximum. And the command in Excel for that is, for minimum, is equals min, min. You'll put an open parentheses, then you have to highlight your data set. Close your parentheses and hit enter, and there it goes. 19 is the smallest number in this data set. The maximum equals max, open parentheses, highlight the data set. Now you could do, A1 to A20 here, but it is easier just to highlight the data set and close your parentheses. So we found our minimum and maximum. We're going to be finding measures of center. We have to find the mean is the first measure of center. We're going to be finding the median and the mode. The mean uses the command. This one's a little weird. It's average equals average. Open parentheses, and again, highlight our data set. Median, that one is just equals median. Highlight the data set. And mode is equals mode. And open parentheses and highlight our data set. So we have those down. Now there is another one, a measure of center called the mid-range. Sometimes is used, sometimes not. There is not a mid-range function in Excel, but we can use equals, open parentheses, the minimum plus the maximum. Now notice I put them in parentheses and I divide that by 2. So you're just averaging together the minimum and the maximum. So there's our mid-range. Measures of spread or variance. Well, the range, again, there is not a range function in Excel. If you type in range, nothing comes up. But what we can do is just do equals maximum minus minimum. So you find the maximum and minimum, you can do it. Also, you could just type in equals max, parentheses, highlight the data. You gotta make sure you close the parentheses here, minus min, parentheses, and highlight your data again. So you say it the same answer. Here I did it all in one command. Here I found the maximum and minimum separately. The variance and standard deviation depend on whether we're dealing with a population or a sample. So we're going to look at variance. It's going to be equals var, var. Open parentheses and you highlight the data. If it's a sample, it's equals var dot s. We highlight our data. Now you can see here it gave us the same answer. What that's telling me is the regular var function does give us the sample variance. So if I do dot p, it'll make sure that is the population variance. Population variance, the difference is we're dividing by n instead of n minus 1. For standard deviation, it's equals STDEV. Now this is for the population, so I'm going to put dot P to specify that this is the standard deviation for the population. And then of course, for sample, equals STDEV dot S to specify that this is for a sample. Now realistically, we could have just done once we had the variance, we know the standard deviation is the square root of variance. To calculate square root in Excel, it's equals SQRT, open parentheses. Now we're going to click on that variance. We're going to make sure we square root that is going to give us the standard deviation. And it does. So those are our measures of spread, the range, variance, and standard deviation. Measures of location or position. We have our quartiles. First quartile equals, we're going to write out the word quartile. Now when I open this up, it says array and quartile. So I highlight the array, I hit comma, then I put 1 for first quartile. There it gives me the 21. Now remember, the second quartile is just the median. We already have that. Third quartile equals quartile. Highlight my array, comma, and 3 for third quartile. Gives you 29.5. Now let's verify with what we know to make sure this is accurate. There are sometimes Excel does some funny extrapolating and rounding. So I'm going to click on A here, and I'm going to do a data, and I'm going to sort. A to Z means smallest to largest. So put some in order, smallest to largest. N in this case equals 20. There are 20 numbers in the list. So the position of the first quartile should be N times, or 20 times 0.25, which would be 5. So that's telling me it's between the 5th and 6th number. Well, the 5th and 6th numbers are both 21. So the first quartile is between 21 and 21, or 21. Position of the third quartile should be 20 times 0.75, or 15. Now, since that's the exact number, that means it's between the 15th and 16th. The 15th is 29, and the 16th is 30. Well, between those should be 29.5. You can see here, this is giving me 29.25. Again, that's that little bit of a strange extrapolation that Excel has. So there might be some small little differences when you go to use the Excel commands. That's just, it's a quirk in Excel. They do a extrapolation. What it is guessing between the numbers rather than just averaging them together. I have not figured out how to overcome that, but on a project or an assignment, if you did 29.25, I would accept that. When you're doing your tests, Connect Math may mark that wrong. If that does come up, just send me an email and I can go back in and look at your tests and fix those grades. I can override those grades for if any problems like that come up. Okay, next we want to look at how do we make frequency tables and graphs and stuff like that. So I'm going to copy this data set. I'm going to go to a new page here. I'm going to paste it in. It's a little larger so it's easier to see. First thing I'm going to do is a frequency table. Now I need to decide on my classes. So we've got to go from 19 to 40. That is 21 numbers. I always add one, 22. So let's say I want to do, if I did 4 sets, that would be about a 5 or 6. Let's do 18 to 24, 25 to 31, 32 to 38. That's not going to work real well. Let me try 18 to 23, 24 to 29, 30 to 35, and 36 to 41. So there we ended up with classes, ranges that go from at least the minimum to at least the maximum. I go one below the minimum and one above the maximum. I did that just to make sure we would have it evenly spaced. So you don't want, if you have to go past the range of the data, you want to go evenly below and above. So one below and one above is what I did here. So each of those can be the same size. Now these numbers only go to the nearest 1, so my classes are only to the nearest 1. If those numbers went to the nearest 10th, I would have to go like 18 to 23.9 and 24 to 29.9, because it cannot be possible for numbers to fall in between those classes. So this is my ranges, my classes. My frequency, well, 18 to 23 is right here. There are 7 of those. 24 to 29 is right there. There are 9 of those, does it look right? 8 of those. There are 8 of those. 30 to 35, there are 2. And 36 to 40, there are 3. So we have a frequency table. To make a histogram. We highlight that frequency table. We're going to click up here on Insert. It's a column chart, not a bar chart, column chart. And we can select any of them. Usually the first option here works best. So it creates, this is a column chart. First thing I do is I can get rid of the key here. So I'm just going to right click and delete. This is not a histogram yet. Now, of course, I would change this title up here to whatever data I have. I didn't really tell you what this data meant, so there really isn't a title to put in here. But to make this a histogram, these bars cannot have any space between them. So I'm going to right click on one of the bars, go to Format Data Series, and set my gap width to 0. Now my bars are tight together. Now that qualifies as a histogram. There is a histogram function if you use some of the add-ins in Excel. Some of those get really weird. Like they only give you like a one number down here instead of giving you the whole range. Doing it this way with the frequency table is the best way, the most statistically accurate way of doing a histogram. Excel sometimes takes some shortcuts, as we saw with the quartiles earlier, that are not necessarily statistically accurate in the strictest sense. Okay, so I'm going to take some information here, and we're going to look at constructing. Let's see if it allows me to just paste values. It does. Okay, so we've got our minimum, maximum, and all that here. I am going to shrink down here and make a scale. There is a function in Excel for making a box plot, but it does a vertical box plot, and usually statistically we prefer our box plots to be horizontal. So I know my minimum is 19. We are going to label from 19 up to 40 or 41. I'll go to 41. So there's my number line across there. I can use my draw tools, insert shapes, to put a line above it if I want to here. That's going to give me that faint blue line, so I can go to outline black. I can right click on it, format shape, set the width to 1.5, make it a little darker or lighter if I want to. So there I have that line. Now for my box plot, I'm going to draw lines, vertical lines. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Let me get this end right up here. There we go. Now I'm going to make that black again, and I'm going to make it a little bit thicker so I can see it. So there I have that line. I'm going to put one of those at my first quartile. My first quartile is at 21. So 21 is right there. So it's over the 21. I'm going to put one of those at my median, which is 27. There's my median. Now I'm going to put one of them at my third quartile, which is 29.25. We actually saw earlier it's actually 29.5. But we'll do 29.25. So up here between 29 and 30 somewhere, right in there we'll go. And then I can connect that. I'm just going to duplicate this so I don't have to do line weights again. With my bars like that. Now notice, didn't use any Excel functions here. All I really used is I just made the size of my cell so I could do a nice evenly spaced number line. You could do this exact same thing in Word if you wanted to, just type in the numbers and hit like 2 or 3 spaces or whatever you decide to put in between them. Now I have to go out to the minimum of 19 and the maximum of 40. So I'm going to go out here, put this there, and just stretch this into 19 is there. The other end, put this at the end here, and I stretch it out to 40. Now I need to check to make sure there are no outliers. I may have to modify this plot. For outliers, remember we take the inner quartile range. So the inner quartile range we're going to calculate here just by taking equals Q3 minus Q1. 8.3, 8.25 is actually what I would get. That's rounded right now. going to move this. So I don't have to adjust myself. So 8.25 is my interquartile range. We take 1.5 times that interquartile range gives us the distance to our upper and lower boundaries from the quartiles. So the lower outlier boundary is the first quartile minus this 12.37, which puts us down to 8.6. Technically it's 8.625. There's nothing below 8.625, so there are no outliers on the lower end. Upper outlier boundary is going to be equal to the third quartile plus this 1.5 times the interquartile range, 41.63. So you see 41.63, there are no outliers on the upper end, so we don't have to worry about it. Had there been an outlier up here, what we would have done is we would have taken this and shaved it back to the next data point. Well, there's 240, so usually makes a good argument for not being outliers. But we would have pulled it back to the next data point, which would have been 38, and then we would put a star or something out there. If we have, let me get back to the right page. If we had an outlier, we could use a star or a dot or whatever. We could insert shapes. They have stars or whatever here. I could just use a circle like that to signify it for that outlier. We didn't have any outliers here, so we don't have to mark them on the box plot. So the box plot is really just that simple. You can use those draw tools. Here in Excel, I used Excel just because it was easier to do the number line. I get the first few in and then use the Excel autocomplete function to just fill in the rest of the numbers up through. You can do the same thing in Word, just typing and spacing as you typed in the numbers yourself. Now remember, all our projects and any assignments that are submitted have to be submitted in Word. So you would have to go ahead and copy this. You'd highlight it and Control C or right click and copy. You can go to a Word document and paste, and there it is. So you have that put into your Word document. So remember, all projects and all other application assignments are to be submitted as a Word document. So that takes care of that part of it. So that's really pretty much all you need to know so far for graphs and stuff like that in Excel. So the next one I'm going to do in just a little bit, I'm going to do one for our probability distributions. And that'll be out in just a little while.